Hello, everybody, and welcome to the G4A show. We are back after a few weeks away. This is episode 108. I am Jordan, as always. I'm always here these days. I don't get a week off anymore. Every
No
now and again I
breaks,
used
just
to get
cracking
weeks
that whip on yourself non-stop.
And if you don't know, the man to my left, if you're watching video or if you're listening, he's still on my left. His name is MBZ, and he is one of the kind of monthly co-hosts here now. He missed his episode last month, but that was actually due to a technical problem on my end.
You lost internet or something.
Yeah, so. For like 24 hours.
Yeah, that's a nightmare. Yeah, so, you start to realize, like, how do we do anything without the internet these days?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. But we were planning back then even to talk about Yakuza games and Judgment games because we are big fans of those games and we want to rank them.
Yes.
But before we get into that today, obviously you haven't been here for a while. So what have you been playing?
Oh, loads of stuff. Most recently, so last night, I rolled credits after 9-10 hours on Immortality, the new Sam Barlow narrative, weird, like, clip game that has been getting a lot of buzz around the internet. Obviously, Edge gave it a 10 out of 10, which is one of the rarest.
That's very rare, right?
Yeah, extremely rare. There's like only 20 games in the history of Edge magazine that have got a 10 out of 10.
So, and they've been around a long time, Edge magazine. So long.
Probably the last relevant UK games magazine. I don't think that there is any other UK games magazine that still exists, basically. One of the last relevant games magazines in the world, let alone anywhere else. But
absolutely,
yeah. And it also came out and got very good scores from elsewhere. And
also, I think the other thing is it's on Game Pass, right?
I was just going to say, yeah, it's
getting a lot of exposure from that.
Right, totally. Which means that I was like, I played Her Story. I actually picked it up after it. So it came out in 2015 or something. I think I picked it up in the winter sale on Steam at the end of the year. And I remember over like that January, end of December period, playing Her Story, like sitting down at a kitchen table with a notepad on my laptop. And I was just like scrolling things out. It was a good time. I really enjoyed that game. It, has some contrivances. And I think the kind of final mystery is like it's a little goofy, but I overall enjoyed it. And then I didn't play Telling Lies. I didn't hear as many great things about it, although there are some people who prefer that to Her Story.
Interesting. Okay.
But after that, I didn't know whether I was going to be interested in this or not, because I was like, oh, maybe not. But then the buzz.
So for me, the weird thing is I've seen all of these games, right?
Yeah.
That you're discussing, and they are my type of game. They're kind of that narrative driven.
Yeah.
I love those kind of games, but I've actually never played any of these.
Interesting.
So
do you have a reason why? Is it because it's like, because the thing is, they're not traditional narrative games, right? They're like weird pieces that you kind of have to put together yourself. They're almost detective games in that way, right?
Yeah. And I don't even think it's that. I think it's just every time one of them comes out, I tend to be busy playing something else.
Got you. Okay.
And then once they pass me by, it's quite hard for me to go back to a game that I've missed, just because
they're also kind of
always moving, right?
They're kind of zeitgeist games as well. So like if you miss the buzz when everyone's playing it, it feels like maybe you don't get that experience as much, if you know what I mean? Because like people are talking about theories online and like going back and forth on what's happening. So
and that's the thing, because I heard about this, I heard about Immortality, and it's like it sounds like a game that I should play. Like me being me, I should probably play this game.
Yeah.
But I'm busy right now playing Last of Us Remake. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm also planning to do some writing about that game, about kind of the accessibility in it, but also I want to discuss, when I write about the game, I want to discuss how actually there's a very strong case for some of these classic games, even if they're not that old, being remade just for the purposes of accessibility.
Sure, yeah.
Because that's something that I think people haven't really thought about up to this point. And, there's a lot of discourse over, is Last of Us Remake worth the money that they're charging for it and all that kind of thing. And then that becomes, is it even worth existing? But it's like, actually, you can say whatever you want about the price they're charging, but you can't say that it shouldn't exist. because this version of the game opens it up to a brand new audience who physically could not play it before.
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
So that's kind of, I've been distracted by that, and that's why I've not got to Immortality.
Yeah.
But it sounds like I should be playing it.
It's so I get scared easily at video games, and there are like elements of this game that I was playing it at night and I was like, should I be doing this to myself? I had a real, like the first night I played it, some weird shit happens and I'm like, I can't get to sleep. I had a really bad night, didn't sleep that well. So, but I continued to play it like the next 3 nights in a row. So like clearly it had its hooks in me. And I think that's the thing. It really is. It was one of those games, and this rarely happens to me, where, you know, I finish work and I'm like, okay, I just want to start playing this straight away. And that's all I do for like the whole evening is like 3-4 hour session, and that's, you know, my total focus.
And that's why you haven't played more of Yakuza Like a Dragon.
I know, yeah, there's so many other games that kind of grabbed my attention, but I think because this one, you know, was on Game Pass day one, and it was a short enough experience, and also like varies wildly in playtime for people.
Do you know, the weird thing is, I actually think, you know, and we've spoken about Game Pass a lot in the past, and like, you can speak about Game Pass till we're dead. I feel like that's kind of, there's so many things to talk about with it, but this game is yet again another positive story out of Game Pass, right? Because if this game hadn't launched into Game Pass, even with the great reviews it's had, it wouldn't be getting the exposure that it's getting. And you know, that's just, I don't know, like,
there are so many Game Pass games that come day one, and they're always stuff that I was kind of interested in, but not quite interested enough to like go and get myself. Like Tinykin's a good example that just came out, which is like a Pikmin style platformer that is like, it's like 6 hours long, and I'm like, that's great, perfect. I'll just blast through that, have a great time with it, and don't have to like buy it on Steam or anything, right? It's just kind of like there and able to download and check it out. So yeah, I think it opens up, and it means that people get different types of experiences, right? Like I did play Her Story, but I don't know if that I was going to be on, you know, straight in for this game. And, you know, what
it allows you to play it without that risk, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and then you end up just loving things that you didn't really know about, and it kind of like broadens your horizons, and genres and all that sort of stuff.
You know, and this is just a prediction from me, but I think the next game that is going to be similar to this in terms of the impact for the game is that game that Obsidian have made,
Pentiment.
I think that's going to have a similar situation.
Yeah.
Where I can imagine some people really liking it, and many of those people saying, I wouldn't have played it if it wasn't for Game Pass.
Oh, yeah. Like, it has a really weird art style that seems a little divisive. Like, I think there's a lot of people who look at that and like, I'm not really interested. But it's from a really big studio with a big pedigree, Josh Schreier, a big name behind it, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that having this kind of, it's also being put out for like 15 quid on Steam. So like they are charging a lower price for it. It's a perfect, like, this is the kind of thing that Microsoft should be doing more of, I think, is getting their studios to make these smaller games that basically...
And experimenting, right?
Experimenting, doing wild things that only indie devs are doing these days, right? Like, it almost is creating that creativity within the AAA space to allow those developers to make smaller experiences that are weird and out there, that are kind of bold and doing something different, but also give them fodder for Game Pass, right? So they constantly have stuff to put on there.
The thing about it from the developer side as well is, if you're getting AAA developers or developers who are used to working on AAA games, you know, they bring a certain way of looking at games that maybe others wouldn't bring to those smaller experiences. Because if those smaller experiences are all you've ever been able to make, it's similar with AAA. You eventually fall into the same trap of, okay, let's do this the same way we always do it, because this is the way that this kind of game works, and this is what people expect from this kind of game. And actually, you know, I saw an interview with Josh Schreier where he said that he loved making this game because it allowed him to do something much more narrative focused compared to other Obsidian games. And also, they didn't really have to worry about failing either. Like, that was the thing, was one of the things I think they've said about, especially kind of since Microsoft's involvement, was it was very much like, oh yeah, you want to make this, just go and do it. Like,
like,
awesome. You know, and that's that's obviously the positive side of all these kind of things. But that's why I love to hear stories like this Immortality game where people are discovering it, and you know that the majority of those people never would have played this game otherwise.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think obviously the Edge 10 helps, and all the high review scores help it. But the just ability for people to just go and download it and check it out is also like one of those games that, because there's no Twitch movement or anything, it's like perfect for cloud stuff as well. So people can casually play
and the other thing is, that's it's like one game that I'm looking forward to that is coming to Game Pass day one. Plague Tale Requiem is like that's a slightly bigger game in terms of name value, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's going to even bring more eyes to the service, which will then hopefully help these smaller games to be discovered even more.
Right. I mean, I've been considering playing the first Plague Tale just because the second one's going to be on Game Pass day one, right? Like, just almost get ahead of it, right? It's super weird. But yeah, I think Immortality is fantastic. It's so weird. Like, you're kind of basically going through these different movie clips of this actress's life and like trying to figure out what happened. And there are lots of like moments that like kind of leave your jaw on the floor, like lots of stunning stuff that happens. So
nice.
Yeah, I highly recommend checking it out for sure.
Well, I will. How long is it roughly?
That's the thing. It depends. You're done when you're satisfied. This is one of the famous things about Her Story is like someone is playing Her Story and they post on Reddit like, "How do I know when I'm done?" And someone's like, "You're done when you're satisfied." And the person replies, "How do I know when I'm satisfied?" Right? Like it's up to you, which is like such a all-timer of a response. But like that's what this game is, right? Like there's a lot to be gleaned from it. You can spend a long time in it. Some people hit credits within 2 hours. Took me about 10, but like it's very it's because it's so non-linear and because you have your own path through it, there's really no kind of like way to say how long it is really.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there anything else you kind of quickly want to shout out that you've been playing before we move on?
I mean, I continue to play Final Fantasy 14. I'm in Heavensward Final Fantasy 14, so I still have 700 hours to go. I don't know until I'm through that. Basically the only thing I was playing for like 3 weeks was Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is easily my game of the year. It's one of my favorite games ever made.
Over Elden Ring.
Yeah. I mean, I love Elden Ring, but I'm a Xenoblade person just generally. Like the first game's one of my favorite RPGs of all time, and Xenoblade 3 is like remarkably good. Like incredible character work, like just narrative, world design, exploration, combat. It's just
I keep hearing this from like every single person who's played it.
It is top tier on every level. It is so fucking good. And I know people are turned off because it's like it's a big JRPG and it's 100 hours long, which it is. It took me like 120 hours or something.
Jeez.
But it's all I can think about for like all those weeks.
I love those kind of games. Like you mentioned it earlier about having a game where you finish work and you come home and immediately you just want to play the game. And even you get to the point with some games where even while you're off doing something else, the game is all you can think about.
100%. Yes. You know what I've been doing? I literally have been going on Twitch and YouTube and watching people's reactions to like certain cutscenes in the game because they are so like impactful.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I cried like multiple times during the game.
I'd love to hear that kind of stuff. So
it's amazing.
Yet again, that sounds like a game that everyone should be playing, really.
If you have 100 hours, which I did take a week off from work to play it, so I did put about 90 hours in that 1 week. Basically,
Jesus, that's significant. Like, You could have finished Like a Dragon and then some.
I could have done, but it's my comfort food. It's there for me. I don't want to, burn away Like a Dragon. I've only got so much of it. That we don't have the next game.
I mean, who knows? RGG Studio is doing their show pretty soon. Possibly, possibly it's already happened. Maybe by the time you've seen this episode.
Yeah.
But I'm fully expecting to see some sort of Like a Dragon 2 reveal there because we've already seen some images of it. So just reveal it, just release it next week.
Release the game, please.
Oh god. But that it feels like weirdly very good timing for us to have this topic because they're having their showcase.
We're almost on the cusp of an announcement.
So obviously there's a lot of Yakuza games. There's 2 spin-off Judgment games, hopefully more, but we'll see what happens with that. Who knows? We'll get into that when we talk about those.
Yes.
And you similar to me, we both kind of came to this series late and
Yeah.
have been playing through it over time, and you've actually played a few more of the games than I have. So
I
because you've
basically went through in chronological order somewhat, right? Because there are remakes of the original games
yeah.
and there's remasters and stuff like that. But so my chronology is I watched back in 2017 when Zero came out, I
Mhm.
watched Giant Bomb play through Yakuza Zero. So I have all the story and the characters and all the framework from that, but I didn't play the game myself. I basically watched it.
Zero was an interesting one. Zero was the first one that I ever tried to play, and it didn't quite click with me for whatever reason.
Yeah. I think you kind of need to get to that Majima scene, that intro for him. Then after that, you're all in, right? Like that's like, okay.
And like, but it's one of those where, you know, I hear people say it sometimes about Yakuza where the first one you play will probably be your favorite.
Yeah.
And weirdly, that isn't true for me. Weirdly, that isn't true for me.
I had so basically from there, I basically was interested in the series and I was like, I should play through these games. And then they all came to Game Pass. I was like, well, here we go. Might as well take advantage of this. So I started with Kiwami, which is the remake of the first game.
Yes.
And like I played it over Christmas, and the game is set at Christmas, and it's like it was
that's almost really, perfect, right?
It was so comforting. It was just like it was that game that I was just chilling with over Christmas, and just spending time running around learning Kamurocho and just like finding all the streets and the alleys, and the story is relatively straightforward compared to other Yakuza games. So it like has this like kind of nice heart at the center of it, of like this little girl, you're trying to look after her. That's kind of all there is to it. And like it has madness at the end, but like it's got this really core, like nice.
The funny thing is there's quite a lot about little girls in Yakuza quite often. But one of the things I love, before we get into kind of ranking these games, one of the things I love about Yakuza is its ability, and I actually think it does it better than any other series in existence, is its ability to kind of balance comedy and silly, fun video game things with very serious stories that actually make you feel emotion.
It is honestly, I don't think I've come across any piece of media that rides that line so perfectly. Like it is, on the one hand, this goofiest shit you have ever seen, but then they'll have like this really dramatic, like well acted, like the cinematography in the Yakuza game is like
it's almost incredible. It's almost like they could make two separate games out of it, right?
Yeah, right. But I don't think they would be as good if they were on their own, right? It's that kind of combination. It's that sweet and sour which just comes together, and it's such a good combo. Absolutely. But yeah, like I think it's like the kind of like melodramatic part of it as well, right? So, like it really goes over the top.
So for you, and I don't know how you've kind of prepared your ranking here.
Sure, yeah.
But obviously, so what are we talking about? There's kind of like 7 Yakuza games.
It depends if we include the Judgment games in that ranking or not, I guess.
Yeah, I think we will, right? So there's 7 Yakuza games, but just for people's knowledge, 7 Yakuza games and
I guess
2
8 Yakuza games because 0. So there's like
0. Yeah, 0. Of course. Yeah.
So, and 2 Judgment. There's a lot of Yakuza games.
So 10 games in total.
Sure. Yeah.
So out of all of these games, which one would you put at number 10?
I think Yakuza 3 is the weakest in the series.
I agree. And I think this might be the only spot we agree on. So that's going to be interesting.
Yakuza 3, I think, is the biggest issue is its age. It didn't get a full-blown remake like the first 2 games.
It was almost like
remastered. And it was a PS3 game. So like it still is kind of modern, but it still feels like a little janky, right? Like his move.
It's almost. Do you know what I'd actually equate it to? It's similar to how I felt when I played Last of Us Remaster on PS4.
Yeah,
with it being a PS3 game, where it was like this still feels modern in terms of its design,
right?
But the movement's a bit clunky and everything's just a little bit clunky.
I think there was a bug maybe, but like combat in Yakuza 3, enemies will block you non-stop. Just like you can't get through them. It is. I play these mainly on easy just because I wasn't a big fan of the combat. But like even on easy, I'm just like trying to mash through enemies. They're just blocking non-stop, and it's a bit of a nightmare. So yeah, the combat stuff is a little jank. The thing I really do like about Yakuza 3 is the first like 6 or 7 hours of that game, you're basically just being a dad, right? Like you have this group of orphans, and you basically like go through all of them. So you kind of like get connected to all of them through these little like side stories where you're helping them out with, like, there's a bully at school, or one of the kids is being mean to the other kid, or there's something going on with each of them with these little stories that, like, it is like Dad Simulator 20 whatever year it came out. Like, it was, it's so good. Like, the character stuff in that is really good, but I do think it's just the mechanic stuff holds it back for me. So I can't rank it any higher than like the bottom for me.
Yeah, for sure. I get that. I totally agree. I think it is the weakest game.
Yeah.
I've only played. I'm kind of trusting you a little bit with with the likes of Kiwami 1 and 2 because I've only played small portions of those games. I never played them all the way through. But and they are remakes of 1 and 2, right?
They're full blown remakes, right? Kiwami 1 uses the same engine as Yakuza 0, and Kiwami 2 uses the same engine as 6, which I think is the Dragon engine that 7 also uses.
I think so.
A much more modern engine and just really nice overall. So.
Very nice engine.
It's really good. It's
because these games, if you haven't seen some of the newer ones, they are beautiful. They are beautiful games. So moving along, because we obviously agreed very easily on number 10. Number 9, what would you have at number 9 out of the Yakuza franchise?
I think I would probably go to Yakuza 4 next, actually. Yeah, it's a step up from 3 for me. I think it has an interesting idea where you play as multiple characters, and one of them I don't even remember. He was like a detective in the Chinatown area, I think. And his story comes last. And I think, the way they structure it, the way that, you'll almost have to wait. You have to wait the whole game to get to Kiryu, and then you finally get to him. I would say the saving grace of 4 is Akiyama, who's really, really cool. I like him a lot. And his opening chapter kind of was like, oh, maybe I'm going to really love this. And I think if I'd had like more of him throughout the game, I think I would have liked it a bit more.
Do you know what? 4 for me is... I agree with you on the positioning because it's a better game than 3 overall. But 4 actually, to me, is a lot of the problems with Yakuza. And what I mean by that is one of Yakuza's biggest problems for a lot of gamers, and why some gamers can't get into it when they try them, is there's a real pacing issue sometimes. And when you're playing as multiple characters, and like you say, you're waiting a considerable amount of time in 4 before you actually get to the character you should really be caring about.
Yeah, that you followed for like 3 games and, want to know what's happening.
And then it's kind of like, I don't know, it's just weird, right?
Yeah, it is a little weird.
It's but I admire them for trying to do something different in terms of the storytelling in that way.
Definitely. I also think it's interesting they kind of like link it back in different ways. Like Saijima has a link to Majima as well. So like they knew each other before, and then you have the whole like...
But that's the clever thing. But that's the clever thing about this entire franchise, is it feels like they've planned it out. It doesn't feel like they're making one game at a time. Even though like they clearly are, but like they kind of like they make it make sense within the fiction of the world they've established. And so you believe like, oh, this is this person knew him in the past, and there's like coming whereas
back
like when you go into we talked about the comedy in these games earlier, but it's like when you go into, I don't know, a shop or something, and you see grown men dressed up as babies,
like multiple times throughout the series. Every time that happens, I will tweet about it, because that's
it makes sense within this world.
It's so stupid. I love it. It's amazing. So I think 4 is cool, and again a little bit more held back by the mechanics. I think it's stronger mechanically than 3 is, but I think also that just weird structure. I think like I like the individual stories more than like, because I don't even really remember who the villain is at the end, or like what they all kind of just come together in the Millennium Tower. And I'm just like, I don't really know what the kind of end goal is here.
It's good for character building. Like they did some really good character stuff there, but the overall narrative suffers because of that, I think. So I'm with you. Number 9. We should have some sort of list really here for people to see.
I need to like write down to make sure I can kind of fit things in here as well. So I'll have some going.
Number 8, I feel like, is where it starts to get trickier, because we're now getting into very, very good games, because if you
Yeah.
haven't played these games, there aren't many bad ones.
No,
Like,
they're all fantastic. Like, yeah, I would say 3 and 4 are like very easily for me the weakest, but then everything else is like,
yeah. And
I don't
even
know.
those to some degree aren't bad necessarily.
Yeah.
3 is an age thing.
Yeah.
And 4 is just a structure thing, I would say.
So
Yeah. After that,
yeah.
how would you feel? How would you feel about number 8 on our list?
So this might be spicy, but I think Lost Judgment is
Oh,
not
I
quite
don't agree.
there.
Oh, I don't agree.
Okay. Well, we
So
can discuss it. We can discuss it. I'm
yeah.
okay to put it a bit further up, but
So
yeah, Lost
why
Judgment is a bit spicy.
why do you think it's not quite there? I need to hear that first.
So I think part of this is that Judgment is one of my favorites, if not my favorite in the series. And so I think I came into this with very high expectations, basically, right?
Yeah.
I think the story of Original Judgment is like probably the best narrative, like from a serious, like dramatic perspective.
Interesting.
And obviously I haven't finished 7 yet, so I can't comment on that. But Lost Judgment for me, I think the side content is really good, and the main story doesn't hold together, right? Like I felt that
that's interesting.
End, it just kind of fell apart, and I didn't really get the motivations and all that sort of stuff. So for me, the main story didn't quite happen.
So that's interesting. I have a weird experience with Lost Judgment.
Okay.
I did actually review it over on the outerhaven.net.
Nice, cool.
I loved the game, but there was, while I was playing it, I went through some of those similar thoughts that you did, where I was kind of like, okay, where is this going? How is this actually, how is it going to play out, and how does it kind of all make sense, and how does it all tie in?
Yeah.
But in the end, I loved it because it made this very kind of personal story about these school children into something much bigger, but it did it in a way that made sense for me. And then by the end, okay, spoilers here for Lost Judgment, but by the end we're talking about a guy who is essentially a serial killer, right?
Yeah, that's the problem I have, really, is like Yagami's kind of like, well, I think I can turn him around. It's like, no, this dude's a serial killer. I don't think that's gonna happen.
But the weird thing is, even with him, I still got his motivations, and that's why I think I was okay with it. And it was like, I'm not saying it's the strongest in the series.
No,
but I think that it looks weaker because we're comparing it to the first Judgment. Do you know what I mean? Like, if this was a game on its own, I think we would have it automatically higher up the list, because they did improve the gameplay. They did improve
I love the
other aspects of the game.
Around on the skateboard in the city, that was very nice.
They added the new fighting style as well, which I thought was quite cool.
Yeah, which also you kind of don't need to use any other fighting style. Snake is so good that you just kind of like break everybody with it. So it's like, I just could counter every single move that you do. Like, sure, it's good fun.
It's brilliant.
I do like the school story stuff. I think some of it gets a bit bloated, like the robot mini game in the school story took forever to do, and I like the dance.
And I haven't,
stuff like that.
I don't know if you have, but I haven't played the DLC yet.
No, I haven't. I want to really play that, the Kaito Files. Yeah,
but yeah, I really want to play that. Because Kaito's an amazing character.
Yes,
like,
he's really cool.
Deserves so much credit. But yeah, for me, I would put this a little bit higher. If it was in this slot for me, I would put Yakuza 5.
Yeah, I love Yakuza 5. Yakuza 5's a bit of a mess, but I do like a lot of what it does. I think it's because it does the split character thing, but I think the characters they focus on are they take a more interesting angle with them. And like playing as Haruka, I think is my favorite part of it, because she doesn't have any combat. She just basically does dance battles with people. And like it's really cool to finally have this character who you basically see this girl grow up from like a 6-year-old into a young adult having a child, like throughout this entire series, which like that's one of the coolest things about the series, how characters literally grow in front of your eyes.
And also you run into characters that you don't expect, right? That you have seen before. And I know you're not far into Yakuza Like a Dragon yet, but interestingly, there was a character that shows up in Lost Judgment that is from Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Right.
And he's actually a main character in Yakuza Like a Dragon, but he's kind of a passing character in Lost Judgment.
Yeah.
And that was interesting to kind of see that, right? Because I just love, like you said, how they build characters in this universe and how all of these characters feel like they fit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even down to some of these shopkeepers are like the same people. And it's just like, okay.
Totally. It's awesome. It's really cool. So, you know, even with like the remakes, there's in Zero, you have the slot car kind of thing going on. And in Kiwami, they build that back into Kiwami because of Zero, right? Like they put all that stuff back in, which is great. So yeah, I like 5 a lot, but
I mean, I know you like 5 a lot, and I'm not saying that 5 needs to go here.
How do you feel about 6? Because like I like 6 a lot.
Oh, I really like 6.
Yeah.
I really like 6.
There's that part where you're just like walking around with a baby and he's crying.
But I kind of like that though.
It's good. Look, that's what I'm saying. That's my favorite part of 6. My favorite part of 6 is Kiryu in a red shirt walking around the seaside town with this baby who will not shut up. And then they play football with the baby. They start throwing this thing and people jumping and catching. That's one of the best cutscenes in the entire series. It's so dumb. But yeah, I think 6 is good as well.
I'm not going to say where yet, but I would have 6 quite high.
Okay. Right. Well, maybe we can put like either Kiwami or Kiwami 2 down here because
that's what I was just going to say. Like, how are you feeling on those ones?
Personally,
I'm happy with
Kiwami.
I'm happy with Lost Judgment to be 1 slot up. I just think it's significantly better than 3 and 4.
Sure. Yeah.
Where it's kind of a little bit of a slight to it.
Yeah,
to have it so close.
No, I can do that. I can do Kiwami at number 8. I think that makes sense. Okay. Now, Kiwami, I personally really love it because it was the first one I played and it really got me connected to the series. Yeah. It is a simpler story. It is like one of the things that it does that I actually kind of loved about it, and I think would have frustrated me in later games, but Kiwami doesn't put side quests on your map. You almost have to it's Yakuza 6 does this as well, actually. Yakuza 6 doesn't put side quests on your map.
I can't remember that.
No, it doesn't. No, it does the same thing as Kiwami, where you just have to run around and see
if and you find them, right? They pop up as you're
exactly. Yeah. So they don't actually put question marks on your map, which they did in all the other games. So I don't know why they took it out. But Kiwami doesn't do that. But I think part of the reason it works for me is because it almost, as the first game, lets you learn the city a lot better. Like I learned Kamurocho because I was just running around between every main chapter. One of my favorite pacing things in Yakuza is you have your main chapters, you do the story, you get the cutscene, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to go do a bunch of side quests now. And then you do all
unless you're like really into the story and you're like, oh no, I want to see the next
if you're near the end, then sure. But like I usually would do the narrative chapter, then do all the sub stories, and then continue with the story, right? Like it's a really satisfying loop. It works really well. And Kiwami is broken up really nicely to do that. So I like it.
And you know what? I actually want to talk about the world for a minute while we're on that kind of topic of learning the world and everything. One thing I love about these games is they are open world games, right?
Yeah.
But they're not too big, but they feel alive in many ways because they're more condensed. So you see people walking around, you run into enemies that you fight, and some of them, if they beat you, they take all your money and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they just do some clever things in the world itself, outside of the narrative or outside of any kind of narrative, to make it fun to engage in being in that world. And it's nice to have, and they do visit other areas as well, but it's nice to have Kamurocho be kind of this, okay, every single game, there's going to be an element of Kamurocho at some point.
Comforting, like you can tell me, okay, go to this point on the map.
And
I don't know the mini map. I know the fastest route there. I know the shortcut, the back alley. Like it is unbelievable. Like the amount I am familiarized with that space and how much that means to me now. It's so weird, but you have this deep connection to that.
And the weird thing is, you actually remember where shops are, right? Yeah. Like individual shops.
Oh, it's on Tenkaichi Street, on like third row down, like on the corner. Like I can see it in my head. Like I know which one. It's so weird. Like it's so good.
Because something this game does quite cleverly is in some quests there'll be like, you'll have a shop that is the same shop, right?
Yes.
But for some quests, you have to go to a specific shop.
Yes.
Where it's like you have to go to this one, and it's so helpful when you already know where that is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially it's just like, okay, it's a dumb quest with a guy in a toilet and he hasn't got any toilet paper, right? And you have to like go buy paper tissues for him. You're like, well, I know exactly where I need to go to get.
And that's why you should pick everything up in this game, because you never know when you're going to need it.
So useful. So we put Kiwami at number 8, and then maybe Lost Judgment above it at number 7.
Yeah, I think number 7.
And then maybe Yakuza 5 above that. How does that sound?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. So that's kind of, what's that? That takes us up to number 6.
Yeah. So just another brief thing on Yakuza 5. I think there are the mini game kind of section for each chapter is really cool. The starting with Kiryu, he's like alone in a different city, and he's a taxi driver. That taxi driving minigame is so much fun because you are like obeying the rules. Like it's not like a driving game where you're just like going ham on an open world. You have to like talk to your customers, make sure you're signaling before you go around the road. Like it's really fun. I don't know why, but like they make like obeying.
It's fun because no other games do it, right?
Yeah,
like that's the thing is any game that does something new, even if it's something that is almost like a simulation where you have to follow the rules, like it's like Power Wash Simulator. Do you know what I mean? Like that shouldn't be fun, but fun. It's fun.
So good. I love it.
So yeah, no, that's fine. Like Yakuza 5 at number 6 on our list.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, we're getting into the top 5 now, but this is where it gets difficult.
It gets very hard. Yeah.
This is where it gets like, we're now kind of splitting hairs between these games to a certain extent, until I get to what my number 1 is. That's kind of where we're splitting hairs. Like, I think there's, if I was to say my number 5 would probably be Yakuza 6.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah, I would say that as well.
Just because Yakuza 6 was the first time where I felt like the narrative was something special. But there's still some of those pacing issues. And like we talked about, there's a weird section where you're carrying around a baby.
No, that is the best part of that game.
I'm not saying it isn't great, but it's just weird, right?
I think it's a really nice reflection, right? Yakuza 6 feels like it's turning around, it's looking back on the journey of Kiryu in the series. There's even a weird section at the start of that game where you're standing on a beach and there's like the ghosts of characters.
Yes.
They're all still alive, but they're just like ghosts for some reason. It almost acts as like a catch up for people, because I think it
felt like, the weird thing is Yakuza 6 felt like the game that could have just ended the series, right?
Yeah,
totally. Like they didn't have to do another game.
Yeah.
And I think they knew what they were doing character wise with it, and it does a lot of really interesting stuff. And cool. I don't know. Like it's a special game to me.
It also looks gorgeous. Like, and also that I think I can't remember the name of the part of Japan, but like it's Okinawa, I think, the seaside setting.
I think so, yeah.
Cool. It's just such a cozy vibe. Like I just love like the little seaside town, and you have like the kind of, you go up the stairs all the way to the temple and stuff like that. It just,
and you know what's funny about that is even that area, you learn it very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. I know that place really well now, which because of how much time you spend there. But
it's so strange. It's so strange.
It's
but
like, it is a reflection though as well, because you know you started this series with Kiryu looking after this young girl, and now you're basically looking after her pseudo son.
Yeah. But actually, again, there's so much more to the narrative, right? Like these narratives have so much depth throughout these games, and the way they connect to each other give them even more depth. It's really very clever, to be honest. And I could have had this game much higher, right? I could have quite easily. This could have been like top 3. That's kind of how good it is. Yeah, but that's how good all of these games are.
They're all really good. I would say next, just because I haven't played it, and I know I respect it a huge amount, and you said it wasn't actually your favorite, and I know everyone loves it, but I would say Yakuza 0 might go next at number 4. How do you feel about that?
I think so. Yeah. Because what I would say about 0 that I did like from the small bit that I played is they did something different with the gameplay, right? They tried to do something a little bit different with the gameplay, but it was still Yakuza. And that were,
and they
and also
let you play as Majima as well, which is nice. Like getting that
yeah.
that perspective, which you never really had before, right?
And
He's just this crazy guy, but then you get like his origin story of like how he became.
And the weird thing is, it's a game that you didn't need to have. Like this game doesn't need to exist for the greater narrative of the other games.
Yeah.
But actually, in its existence, it builds so much on certain characters and on certain relationships in the universe that it's actually really important.
Yeah.
It's it's a strange one. Like I would definitely put it, I think again, like we said, at this point, any of these games are interchangeable. But Zero, I think that's a fair place for it. Number 4 on our list.
Cool. I would put Kiwami 2 at number 3. This
okay,
is probably
why? So I'm trusting you on this one.
This one is really like, because it's a remake of probably one of the best stories in the series. Just really good, like strong villain, probably the most memorable villain, if not one of the most memorable villains in the series. Like interesting kind of like narrative through line with like the origin of like how transfer of power is happening within the clan, right? Like the previous it's like a joke ending of the first game, but like Kiryu gets made the 4th chairman and then immediately abandons it and doesn't become him anymore. So throughout the rest of the series, everyone calls him the 4th chairman, but he was the 4th chairman for maybe less than 24 hours. So, but he still gets that reverence, which is really funny. And so you're kind of like ushering through like the young buck Daigo, who's going to become the kind of chairman of the clan for the next like part of the series,
who actually becomes a very important character in the entire series as well.
He's super important, right? Like throughout everything that takes place. So you like one of the first things you do is like beat him up in the street as a young punk ass teen because he's not obeying his father. So it's like it's this really cool like thing that you kind of like build up. But the thing that really worked for me with Kiwami is its minigame stuff with the hostess club is probably my favorite in the entire series. I spent like 12 hours just playing that minigame. It was so good. Like the whole storyline through it with all kind of like the girls that you help recruit, and then like you enter this competition. There's a whole like tournament angle, all these different teams that come in and like slowly building up this like entire separate narrative that you could just totally miss, right?
I remember I remembered something similar to that in a way in Lost Judgment, where it was like the dance club in the school, and you'd be, you get roped into teaching them how to dance, and it's like, but actually there's a narrative that goes along with that sub story.
That's what I really liked about those school stories, is all of them have that kind of like component to it as we go through.
And that's something that we've said it before, but Yakuza does it really well, where it builds on these characters that there are some things that you can miss in Yakuza that are actually very important, but you don't realize they're important till later, and that's kind of the issue. Similar to, I won't spoil it for you, but there's a mini game in Like a Dragon,
which I'm looking forward to getting to because I've heard some good things about it,
that I spent literal, like I could play this as a video game,
as a 30-hour game on its own, right?
It's so weird.
That's the big thing, is like each Yakuza game has a part like that you could just sink hundreds of hours into, right? And I love that the game does that. Obviously Zero has the hostess club stuff as well, but I haven't played
what is it though, really, like outside of these side activities and stuff, what is it about Kiwami 2 specifically that you would put it so high among these other great games here?
I think it's just like, the narrative is really strong, but also like because it's a remake using the Dragon engine and it just has that fluidity to it, it takes the storytelling of like the classic original Yakuza games, pairing it with like the modern touches of the new ones to make something that I think overall stands
special,
like a step above, basically.
That makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I, like I said, I'm trusting you on Kiwami 1 and 2 because I haven't actually played those. So
it also has like, the end of it is, how in Yakuza, like you get to the end and they suddenly reveal like 12 different villains you've never heard of throughout the entire game. Like it kind of does that, but it does it in such a melodramatic, like dumb but also serious way. You know, like we're talking about how Yakuza melds dumb and serious. I think 2 does it like probably the best, or maybe closer to the best of the series, where the side stories, the sub stories are so off the rails. But then, like, they make a little bit of that seep into the main story. The number of times you see people get shot in a Yakuza game, you're like, yeah, they're fine. Like, Kiryu's been shot probably 50 times across the series. He's all right. He'll make
bulletproof.
it through. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's very, very good.
So I'm gonna take number 2, and I'll explain why. I'll explain why I put this game at number 2. But it's Judgment. Judgment has to be number 2. And obviously I'll explain more why when I talk about my number 1, which clearly isn't your number 1 because you haven't.
I'm not finished. Look, I like it a lot, but that's why I would argue for Judgment as number 1. But we'll see. What you say.
Yeah. Well, we'll see when you finish Like a Dragon.
Exactly.
That's what we'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
So for me, Judgment. The reason Judgment is number 2, but could easily be number 1, is it takes this world that is already established and it gives it its own spin, which gives it a completely different tone, but still doesn't lose what Yakuza is.
Yes.
And that's so clever.
It's really
because the whole world has a different tone. Like everything feels a little bit more serious, but they still have that weird, wacky Yakuza stuff if you want it. Yeah. It's just not quite as much in your face. Yes. And they're a little bit more story focused in the sense that I would say pacing wise, they're trying to push you down the story more than they do in the mainline Yakuza games.
And I think it's a more compelling drama, right? Like it's a story that covers like a national.
It talks about political corruptness, right?
Oh, yeah. It's like a political drama that like brings in like this medical stuff as well, of like a national scandal on like a medical scale.
But the most clever thing is they tie in the very origin of what makes your character into the main narrative,
of course,
and you don't even realize it until much later in the game.
Well, it's a classic thing that like Ace Attorney does. Like I'm a huge fan of the Phoenix Wright games, and Judgment is almost a merging of Phoenix Wright plus Yakuza, which is like for me, I was like, well, this is a dream come true, right? It's like my 2 favorite things. And so there's even a side story in Judgment where they basically have a courtroom battle in the office over who's eating a sandwich, and they do the objection. It's so good, it's amazing. But yeah, I think the reason Judgment worked for me is not only that stuff, not only it has a really compelling new set of characters and narrative, but the gameplay is just so evolved. Like the combat in Judgment in terms of
feels like silky smooth, right?
In terms of the action combat, it is the best in the series. Yagami is like, he's lithe, he's like faster. I like Kiryu, but Kiryu's very tankish. He's very heavy.
The thing about Yagami is he feels trained, whereas Kiryu just feels like a guy who's having a fist fight on the street.
He's just got lots of muscles and will punch you, basically. Whereas Yagami's like flipping off walls, doing backslides, going under people's legs. Like he's very almost like a dancer, right? Like he's kind of like flipping about.
Yeah, and also the other thing is, it's just the stuff like, being able to kind of kick someone through a window or things like that.
All the contextual. Also, we haven't talked about heat actions at all in the series.
Oh my god,
what an amazing like part of all these games.
Like, and also the funny thing is when a heat action happens that you don't expect. So like you press the button and you're sort of thinking that one thing will happen, and then it's something completely different.
Oh my god, my favorite ones are like where the shopkeepers help you out. That you're just standing there and the shopkeeper will throw you a bottle of hot sauce and you just like pour it in a guy's eyes. It's like, this is so dumb. I love it. It's amazing. It's the greatest thing I've made. That's why I would probably have Judgment at number 1, only because I haven't finished Like a Dragon, right? Like so far I'm 10 hours into Like a Dragon, and I think that the game is really, really good. It's already touching on like societal issues and like interesting stuff, while also having like some of the best sub stories so far already in the beginning.
Just so I know roughly where you are narrative wise, whereabouts are you narrative wise?
So it's been a little while since I picked it up, but I have Namba and I have the police dude, and I think I've done the first dungeon, the first main dungeon basically. So I got the woman who had there was the hospital where they were actually killing people upstairs. I'm just after that, I think. So I've just done that.
Okay. I know where you are.
I'm still relatively early, I think.
You are, yeah. The game is about 50 hours long.
Yes,
so,
probably longer if I spend time doing like, you know, the cinema mini game, which I already did with the stupid sheep and stuff. Like, it's so good.
But this is the thing, right? So I'll explain why I think Like a Dragon, which is Yakuza 7 basically, is the best.
Yeah.
It's because I thought it was going to be the worst going in. And
yeah, because the combat changed, right? Like
the combat, they went turn-based, right?
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, okay. I was someone who actually liked the action-based combat, and I felt like that was what made Yakuza in many ways. And I wasn't a turn-based fan at all. Like, I actually hated turn-based games. And then this is one of the best games I've ever played, let alone Yakuza. Like, this is like a top 10 game of all time for me.
Wow.
And it's for many, many things. One is it has that great Yakuza narrative that we always talk about, but they've done it while introducing a whole new cast of characters. And I'm not going to spoil any of it here, obviously, because MBZ, you haven't played it yet, but it's one of the best narratives, I think, in video games, because it does wacky JRPG turn-based narrative stuff, but then it also has that more serious kind of narrative you'd expect from some of the other Yakuza games as well.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Judgment, like, is touching on like the idea of homelessness and like people who are kind of on the fringes of society and like how those people are treated, and like it pushes back on a lot of stuff. Like, I think already within the first kind of few hours,
what I think is quite clever as well is they use tropes for certain characters, but they're using those tropes to examine the way that other people view those kind of people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And also, they're just very, very clever because they made it into a turn-based game because the main character sees the world as Dragon Quest.
Which is amazing. Like, I love Dragon Quest. And so the fact that they have the, you know, the goal to not to like, because they could have written around it and been like, oh, it's Dragoon Questicle, right? Something like that. Like, no, he just likes Dragon Quest. They just say out loud. It's great.
Absolutely. But yeah, and you know, I was concerned as well when it was a brand new protagonist. It's kind of like, I love Kiryu, and he's one of, you know, very stoic man, but a great character. And I felt like he finally was growing in Yakuza 6 as well.
Sure, yeah.
And then it was like, oh, now we've left him behind. Like, there was actually some growth of character, some real growth, and we've left him behind. Or have we? And you know, and then it's one of those things where it's like, actually, Ichiban Kasuga, I think, is an amazing character.
Because I already think he might be better than Kiryu. I don't know.
So yeah, I think he is. I think he's a better character, and I actually
he's very different though, right? Like, it's almost hard to compare them because they're both doing very.
He is very different, but they feel like, weirdly, they feel like they're kind of, you know, part of the same coin. Do you know what I mean? They're like,
and quite literally as well. If you look at Ichiban's outfit compared to Kiryu's, it is flipped inverse. The colors of his jacket and his shirt are flipped, and the same with the tattoo on his back. It's like it's a dragon fish, but it's like twisted. It's like the opposite side as well. So there's a reflection being made again, you know, between the two characters.
And what I love about this story in particular, before I move on to the other things I really love about the game, but this story in particular I loved because it's about a guy who isn't this kind of fearsome, everyone respects him and runs the other way when they hear his name, right? That's not what Ichiban is. He's kind of trying to build his way up in this universe and in this world of the Yakuza, and for some reason, for whatever reason, there are people who he really respects just pretending like he doesn't exist. There are other things that happen that kind of aren't explained very early on at all, but when they're explained later, they make a hell of a lot of sense. and it also feels like the game that is the one in a story sense that has the most impact on the future Yakuza games. Like by the end, it feels like it changes where Yakuza is going to go in a story sense.
Okay, that's exciting.
That's going to be interesting to see your reaction to that. So I'm sure we'll talk about it as you play more. But the other thing is, just from a gameplay standpoint, it's an amazing turn-based game. Like,
I think there's definitely like you can see the kind of wrinkles that they're kind of trying to overcome. I'm sure they'll iron out by next time. But
well, the thing is, this is the first time they've done it, right? In terms of turn-based games,
they're almost trying to blend action with turn-based because of the positional stuff with characters. And like sometimes you'll run towards someone, you'll just keep running into a wall, and then you'll just teleport there, just because they haven't quite figured it out yet. But I like the ideas they have. Like when you knock someone down, if they're on the ground, you get there quick enough, you do more damage when they're on the ground.
And I like, you know? I like that they're not just doing turn-based. They're trying to put their own spin on it, right?
Yeah, it's almost bringing in like Paper Mario or Mario RPG elements where if you have the right timing, you can take less damage by blocking and stuff like that, which is cool.
Yeah, so I love all that kind of stuff, and I didn't expect to love it. Like, I loved it from a gameplay standpoint, and finding the jobs that I liked. Do you know what I mean? And all those, and jobs have obviously been in other turn-based games before.
I mean, it's a hallmark of the Dragon Quest series, which they're riffing on, which totally makes sense.
Right? But it's one of those things where it's like, but in this universe, that's extremely fun to see. Like being able to have my guy just play a guitar. You know what I mean? And like then he's like smacking people around the head with a guitar, and
it's really dumb.
It's it is, and just I think they did this thing where making the game turn-based for whatever reason just makes everything better because it makes everything more meaningful. Like you go around collecting things because you need certain materials for upgrades, right? And there is don't get me wrong, in typical turn-based fashion, there's a moment in this game where it becomes a little bit grindy.
I've heard about that, which I'm a little worried about, but you know,
but it's one of those things as well where like it does become a little bit grindy, but it's also they give you the tools to grind in a way where it's fun. And that's what I enjoyed about it. It took me, you know, I won't tell you when it happens in the game, but it took me around an hour and a half to 2 hours of kind of doing this certain thing over and over again for levels. But because of the way the turn-based combat works, with the timing aspect and with the different jobs you can have, and you can level up jobs as well as character levels and all that kind of stuff, it actually felt unique every time I did it. And so it made it feel less grindy, even though I was grinding for levels.
I think they could have gone around that in a couple of ways. Like one of them is just like have a difficulty setting of easy where it's just easier to get through the fight, so you don't have to worry about grinding, or just balance it a bit better.
The other thing is,
in the future, you know,
the other thing is, and I won't spoil it, but the reason I was okay with the grinding is because in the world of Yakuza, the reason you have to grind at this specific point makes sense.
Okay.
Look, like you get into this fight and you yourself are like, there's no way Ichiban would win this fight.
Right.
So do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So within the context of the world, the grinding aspect makes sense. Yeah. But in a way, I wish they would have played that into the story rather than have it be traditional grinding where it's just like, oh, I can't beat this person, so I now have to go away and do this.
You can say that, but it's like, yeah, I get it, but also like it's like a lot of, it's just a little annoying. You know, you can make the commentary of like, yeah, you should, this is hard and you should be grinding, but then I think like that's maybe the weakest part. You know, that I'm not necessarily looking forward to, but I understand. I'll get there. You know, I'm sure it'll be fine. But
and I don't know. It was something about like. It was the combination of not expecting to enjoy the turn-based change, and then also what I would consider the best story in the franchise and the best characters in the franchise. Like, I think this is the the group of characters, your party that you build up over the course of the game, every character has something I like about them, and they all have their own unique quirks and in typical Yakuza fashion, and it's just like, but even their side stories. So at a certain point in the game, you are able to kind of build up relationships with them and learn more about why they are who they are and where they got to and all that kind of stuff. And it's like that stuff actually feeds into the main narrative in many ways.
Yeah.
But you could completely miss that. And it's, that's again great side content. And you spoke earlier about some of the kind of sub stories that you've played already.
Yeah, the pissing guy already was a good one. There was the one where the kid wants to make a bookcase and his dad wants to throw out the bookcase. Like,
did you do the like lobster one yet?
I don't remember.
Okay.
That sounds like it would be memorable. So maybe I haven't.
There's a lobster one.
Okay. All right. I'm looking forward to it.
And also the thing is they throw some cool mechanics into this game. And again, they're not unusual for turn-based games, but the way they work in this game is just typical Yakuza hilariousness. Yeah. So you essentially at some point will get basically what is summons. Right?
Yes, I have a few already. Pound mate, shout out to the pound mates.
Yeah,
real dumb, very into that stuff. But also, I don't have enough money at the moment to use them that much. So I need to make some money first. So
there's that one of the mini games allows you to make a lot of money very quickly. Right. So
cool.
So that's good to know. But yeah. And
so are we going to put this? Where are we going to put this? Because I haven't finished it yet.
Should we just say it's tied for now? Until you finish.
What we could do is we could make Judgment number 1 because we both played it, and as soon as I finish Like a Dragon and I can render Judgment here, we can revisit the conversation and see if it changes.
Okay. So yeah, maybe we do that. All right. I'm happy enough to do that, but I will put it out there now that I believe that by the time you finish, you will think this is the best game.
Cool.
So yeah. As of this very moment in time, whatever day you're seeing this, September 2022, MBZ has decided, or we have.
I think we both love Judgment. I think it's a good consensus pick.
We've come to an agreement that Judgment is number 1 until MBZ can deliver his Judgment. Like a Dragon.
Yeah, I'm going to play some tonight, so I'm looking forward to jumping back in.
So hopefully, MBZ's only here once a month, so maybe in another episode or 2, he may have had his verdict.
Depends how busy things get for me, but yes, we'll see. Also, I'm kind of in a race to beat it before it leaves Game Pass, which I think might give me another 6 months or so. So I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But what I would say is, my last kind of piece of advice on Like a Dragon before we end here is, if you're someone who's not really into turn-based games, even if you've never played a Yakuza game, because you don't have to have played a Yakuza game to play this one, this is a very good kind of first turn-based RPG game.
Yeah. Would you say it's the best starting? Because I guess we can give recommendations for the best starting point for Yakuza. I think this is one of them. I think
this is one of them.
Judgment is another one because it's a brand new universe, and then I would say Zero is another good one to start at the very beginning.
Yeah, so I kind of agree. It's weird. I have a few thoughts on it. Judgment, I think, stands on its own, so you can start with that one at any kind of time, and that's fine. I think this one's a very good starting point, Like a Dragon, just because it is defining where the franchise is going to go. And it's the only one where you don't, other than Zero, obviously, where you don't need to have played any of the other mainline Yakuza games.
Yeah, obviously there's references and stuff for fans, but
However, one thing I would say, I actually think in a weird way, you could even start on 6 if you wanted to.
Yeah, you could. I don't know. 6. I think 6 has enough baggage from the past. It explains stuff, but yeah, it's a very modern playable game, So.
Yeah, I guess what I mean is 6, because it's the end of a character's journey in many ways. but it's also, like we said, it's holding up that mirror to the past.
Exactly.
It actually explains a lot of what's happened before for that character.
And you really, I think, at the end of the day, even though there is connecting threads through all of these, you can play each Yakuza game like standalone if you really want to.
Absolutely.
Each of them tell self-contained stories, but you get more out of it.
I think if you were to ask me, the best 3 starting points, it is essentially you either start with 0, which would, but then I would say only start with 0 if you're planning to play all of the other games.
Yeah.
Like, that's a weird thing to say, but that's kind of, other than that, you should probably start with Judgment. You should probably play Judgment, then Like a Dragon, and then Lost Judgment. I would still recommend playing, even though we didn't put it as high on our list. It's still what I'd consider a good game. Yeah, totally. So there you go. That's kind of our ranking, which will be updated at some point potentially.
It for sure.
So I guess right now we could say that Like a Dragon is in number 2, based on my opinion of the game.
Sure, yeah.
And then it might be number 1, or it could be bumped down a little bit.
Maybe I will hate everything else about this game. Who knows? Yeah, let's see. I'm sure I'll love it. So
for sure. And we will see MBZ again in about 4 weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thank you for coming back, and I'm sure at some point we'll have some Nintendo news to discuss with you.
Yeah,
because of course, if people don't know, you are the Nintendo guy, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a Nintendo podcast. Where can people find that?
You can go to if you just search This Nintendo Life on any podcasting platform or iTunes or Spotify or whatever, you should find us. We talk about Nintendo every 2 weeks. It's a good fun time. We're hoping there will.
Hello.
There we go. I think you disappeared for a second. Anyway, I was just saying that you can find us This Nintendo Life, search everywhere, and we're every 2 weeks we talk about Nintendo stuff, and hopefully there will be a Nintendo Direct soon that we can talk about.
For sure.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we'll get you talking about some PlayStation at some point and some Xbox as well.
Look, I'll be playing God of War just like everybody else, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you for joining me for this episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you are not a Yakuza fan, go and play them because you should. You really should.
You have to.
And also, do you know what the thing is? We talked about them being on Game Pass, but they're also now on PlayStation Plus Premium.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
so, go and play over there if that's where you play.
Yeah.
Because they're really worth at least trying. So, give that a go and let us know what you think if you do. Follow us at G4A Network on Twitter or at Eat Sleep Game, which is our gaming channel, obviously. On YouTube, you can find Eat Sleep Game and subscribe there. And Luke does his little playthrough videos and all those kind of things, his little YouTube shorts. And we have a weekly podcast most of the time. Obviously, it's been a bit up and down recently just because I've been so busy, but life is life, and who knows? Who knows? But we should be back next week. It won't be MBZ, it'll be somebody else because he, as I said, only turns up once a month. He has his own podcast to do. We'll put all his links down below, and go and check him out because he does some great content. And we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.